Jews and food, it's all about the continuation of what we learned last week. But today we're learning about the blessings before and after food. Our sages legislate that we should recite short blessings before we eat. There's two reasons for why we do this. Number one is permission, and number two is gratitude. Permission, you do in order to ask permission from the owner of something before taking it. This is very closely related to what we're learning in the Gates of Trust, the doctrine of trust, which is saying that everything is in the hands of Hashem. God is the master of the universe, didn't only create the universe in the beginning, he continues to maintain it at every given moment, and therefore everything is in the hands of God. If I want to take a fruit off a tree, I've got to thank God, I've got to ask permission. Not just thank God, I've got to request permission from God. So I can't just walk into your house and take something from your dining room table and walk out. I'd have to ask you permission first. So too, by reciting the blessing, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam motzi lechem min haaretz, as we'll learn about in a moment, we're actually affirming our trust that God is the only master of the universe at all times. That's number one. A second component of the blessing before food is of gratitude. That we're simply saying thank you to God for providing us with this food. The Kuzari, who was a name for the Khazar king, he was a sage who managed to influence the Khazar kingdom to convert to Judaism. It was about 500, 600, 700 years ago. He writes in his book the analogy of a drunk person who is given food, drink, and spends time with friends. When he sobers up, doesn't remember anything. And the pleasure that he derived was very limited. In a similar way, says the Kuzari, we also are living our lives in a drunk-like state. We go through the motions of life without being mindful of the experience, and it leaves little long-term impact. When we recite blessings, however, we make ourselves aware of the fact that life could have worked out in a manner. We make ourselves aware of the fact that life could have worked out in a manner that such, with that affirmation, we become mindful. The blessings before food, therefore, are an opportunity for us to slow down and smell the roses, to realize, to breathe in all the beauty that surrounds us, and to be able to be mindful and conscious and present of our reality. Otherwise, you could be living life in such a fast pace that you won't even notice the beauty around. Now, there are 6 blessings that we need to be aware of. I'd like to draw your attention to these blessings. You'll find them on our website at georgegardens.com/Judaism at home. I'm going to post this link to you on all the groups, on Facebook, YouTube, and on Zoom. Let's see. Good morning, Harvey. And good morning to Brandon and Julia. Is anybody having a hard time seeing the message here? Because I wonder if having all three platforms open is slowing down our bandwidth. Here it is. Okay, fine. So here's the link. Okay, so I'm posting the student handout over here. You'll see it on in the comments of Facebook and YouTube, and now it's coming up into Zoom as well. I'm putting it in the chat box of the Zoom as well. And here's what we need to do. If you look at the student handout, I'm going to share my screen on Zoom so we'll be able to see it together. Okay, there it is. So I'm moving to the student handout. If you can open it up, the one that I posted on Zoom and on YouTube and on Facebook. So where is it? Here it is. Okay, I see it's on page 4. Here it is. You'll see the blessing, the chart for the blessings is on page 4. So as you look at this chart, it's made for your easy use, so you can pull it out and pull it in, put it in your kitchen. Hi, Warren, nice to see you with Helen. When you look at this chart, you'll see the kind of blessing we need to be mindful of. If the general category is like this, there's 2 categories: whether it grows on the ground or if it grows on a tree, it has a different blessing. Then the most important fruit that grows on a tree will have its own blessing, and the most important fruit that grows in the ground will also have its own blessing. What is the most important fruit of the tree? What's the most expensive fruit of the tree? That would be grape or wine. And what is the most important fruit of the ground? That would be bread. And that bread has its own blessing, and wine has its own blessing. Everything else that doesn't fit into the fruit of the tree or the fruit of the ground, all of that would be incorporated in a 5th blessing, something else, which we're going to look at in a moment. So if you look at the chart on the screen, you'll see the first blessing is the fruit of the tree. It's called Borei Peri Ha'etz. So you say, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, blessed are you, Lord our King, Lord our God, King of the universe. Borei Peri Ha'etz, who creates the fruit of the tree. And it's a vegetable or a fruit of a plant. Then you'll say, Borei Peri Adama, who creates the fruit of the earth. It's so easy to make these blessings. You just have this list ready for you before you eat. I have a feeling that we just got knocked off Facebook. Anybody know about this? I'm pretty sure that we're knocked off of Facebook. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Facebook is like totally non-responsive. Oh boy. Okay, I'm going to end the live video on Facebook. It's just not working, and I think it's slowing down the whole thing. Hopefully, the rest of the communication will be easier now. Okay, so we're only on YouTube and on Zoom right now. So if you want to join us on Zoom, it's jewish.com/Zoom. It's jewishgardens.com/Zoom. And if you want to join us on YouTube, it's youtube.com/jewishgardens. Now, I got to find out what happened to my screen. I'm sorry. Oh. Okay, so fine. So you want to print this thing out and put it in your kitchen. It's so easy to make these blessings. Blessed are you, Lord God, so you, Lord God, King of the universe, who creates the fruit of the tree, who creates the fruit of the earth. Borei Peri Ha'etz, Borei Peri Adama. Simple. Now, the third blessing, I'm going to skip the third blessing because it's a little bit more confusing. I'm going to go to the 4th blessing on the screen. If it's the most important fruit of the ground, if it's bread or matzah, then you'll say, Motzi lechem min haaretz. If it's bread or matzah, you'll say, Motzi lechem min haaretz. Simple. We're very familiar with that blessing, and we're also familiar with blessing number 5, which is the most important fruit of the tree, which is wine or grape juice. Borei Peri Hagafen. And then we reach blessing number 3. Now, the third blessing you see on the screen. If you have the student handout, it's page 4 of the student handout. You'll see in this third blessing, it's basically anything made out of the 5 grains, which is not bread. So the 5 grains are wheat, barley, spelt, oats, or rye. Wheat, barley, spelt, oats, or rye, which is not bread. If it's made out of these 5 grains, but it's not actually bread, if it's just some sort of cake or cookies made out of grain, then you'll make a different blessing called Borei Minei Mezonot, who creates various kinds of foods. Now, anything which doesn't fit into these categories of the fruits of the tree or the fruits of the ground, if it doesn't come from any of those two, it will be the final blessing of Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam she'akol nihiya bidvaro, by whose word all things came to be. By whose word all things came to be. So God basically creates through his speech. What would that include? If it doesn't grow in the tree or in the ground, it would be like eggs, meat, fish, chicken, drinks, everything else, basically. And that is, my friends, the blessings that we recite before we eat food. There's some various interesting laws that I need to share with you here about these blessings. Okay, and they are as follows. If you have any questions, please let me know. So again, you should print this out, print it in color, and put it in your kitchen, maybe more than one copy, so that way you'll be able to be familiar with these blessings. First of all, when we consume bread, when you say the blessing on bread, the fourth blessing, hamotzi lechem min haaretz, that's a catch-all blessing. It covers everything in that meal, with the exception of wine. If you drink wine during the meal, then you also have to mention borei peri agafen. But once you've made the blessing of hamotzi, you don't need to make any other individual blessings, because hamotzi is the most important food and incorporates everything in it in the thanking of Hashem. But if you're not consuming bread, then each food on the table, each food category needs its own blessing. So let's say you're not washing and you're at the buffet, then you got to be mindful. You have to make sure to make a blessing on the fruits that grow in the tree, on the fruits that grow in the ground, on 5 grains that are not breads, as well as wine, and as well as everything else that doesn't grow in the tree or in the ground. What this means on a practical level is the following 5 steps. Number 1, before you make a blessing, you want to make sure that the food is ready and prepared to be eaten. Number 1, you can't just make the blessing and then start looking for the food. The food has got to be ready and ready to be consumed. Number 2, you got to be able to identify the proper blessing before you make it. You can't say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam and now start scratching your head which blessing to make. After you know the blessing, you now say the blessing in a language that you understand. Obviously, you have to understand the blessing. Now, it's not going to be very difficult to understand of 3 words. Borei peri ha'etz, who creates the fruit of the tree. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand this, and therefore, it's advisable to learn it in Hebrew, so that way you'll be able to recite the proper blessings in Hebrew, which is preferred. And right after you make the blessing, you take a bite. You don't make a blessing and then go to the bathroom or take a walk or have a conversation with someone. The moment you make the blessing, you have to make adjacent the blessing with the fulfillment of that which you blessed, which is obviously the bite from the food. Make sure there's no separation. One final point is to remember that you only make the blessing 1 time during each sitting. So you don't make a blessing on each grape that you're eating, borei peri ha'etz. You don't make a blessing on each bite of an apple, borei peri ha'etz. What you'll do is you'll make on each category 1 time during each sitting. And here it becomes very interesting. What happens if food keeps on coming out from the kitchen that you didn't know? So if you're a guest at someone's house and you really have no idea what's on the menu, then when you made your blessing in the beginning on the fruits of the tree or the fruits of the earth, you had in mind whatever comes out of that kitchen is included in my blessing. But if it's in your own home, let's say, and you do know what's coming, and you made the blessing borei peri ha'etz on what you thought was coming, and then something else surprises you, then you do need to make the blessing on the new fruits of the tree that came out that you were not expecting. For example, your wife made a fruit salad and you're eating the fruit salad. So you made a blessing on the fruits of the tree. Later on, she brings out figs. And you didn't know that there were figs in the house. I didn't even know we bought figs. She said, yeah, we bought figs. So she brought out figs. Then you have to make a second blessing on the fruits of the tree because you didn't know that the figs were coming. Now, another interesting point is that the final blessing, the 6th one, Shakol nihiya bidvaro, doesn't only cover, it's also a bit of a catch-all blessing. It doesn't only cover things that don't grow in the tree or in the ground, but really it says that everything was created through God's word. So when you say that blessing, you theoretically are including everything that grows on a tree or that grows on the ground. So if you wanted to cut corners, you might be able to just say the blessing shehakol, niyah b'varo, that everything was created through speech. If you want to be lazy, you could just do it that way. Just say the shehakol blessing and everything's covered if you're not eating bread. But that really defeats the purpose of the gratitude. When you realize that the purpose of the blessings is not in order to ruin our appetite or to slow us down. Sorry, it is to slow us down. It is to slow us down and make us mindful, to make us grateful for the blessings that God has endowed and bestowed upon us. When you realize the purpose of blessing is to pay gratitude to Hashem. If it's about permission only, okay, so you ask permission once and finished. When you go to someone's house, you don't ask him, can I have a grape? Can I have a banana? Can I have a cookie? You don't ask him 45 questions. You say, am I invited to your house? Thank you very much. And now you enjoy whatever's there. Gratitude, permission you can do with one request. But when it comes to gratitude, you say thank you. You say thank you for everything that comes your way. And that way you're not ungrateful. They tell a story of a guy who walks into a restaurant and he orders a tea in a fancy Parisian restaurant, and they charge him 14 euro for the tea. He says, 1 second, 14 euro for a tea? It's just water in a tea bag. I mean, like, seriously, what is this? So the restaurant says, yeah, the tea bag is the tea bag and the water might not cost 14 euro, but here you're getting white tablecloths. Here you're getting an expensive rent in the center of Paris. Just off the Champs-Elysees, you're getting waiters in tuxedos. You're getting live orchestra music. That's what you're paying for. You're paying for much more than just a tea bag and some water. Right? You want the tea bag and the water, go home. You want an experience, you come here. And it dawned on the fella that when we thank Hashem for shehakol and niyah b'dvaro, for creating everything through his speech, we're not just thanking him for this little cup of coffee here. We're thanking him for the weather. And we're thanking him for our gesund, for our health, and for our mind and our ability to concentrate, and for the clothing and for the whole experience that God has given us. We have so much to be grateful for, so much to be mindful about. Now, one more point before we finish this section is that it's not all black and white when it comes to blessings. These are some of the most complicated laws of all Judaism. How do you know the difference between something which grows in the tree and something which grows in the ground? Are you able to tell? Is it easy for you to tell if something grows in the tree or in the ground? Let me ask you, friends, do you know what blessing you make on a banana? What blessing would you make on a banana? Anybody? What does a banana grow? Borei Peri Ha'adama, says Andy. Good. Borei Peri Ha'adama, who creates the fruits of the ground. Now, we all know that bananas grow in a banana tree. So why would you say Borei Peri Ha'adama? The reason is because a banana tree is actually not a banana tree. It is actually a banana bush. That's what it is. It's a banana bush. Why do we say it's a banana bush? It's actually a weed because it doesn't have a trunk. It doesn't have a bark that lasts from year to year. It actually dies. Once it produces a bunch of bananas, it dies. And therefore, it looks like a tree. It smells like a tree, but it's not a tree. It's actually a big, tall bush. So that's why the banana, you make the blessing, the blessing of the fruits that grow on the ground. How about a strawberry? Andy, what do you think about a strawberry? You know, what?
I said I had to unmute myself first. Sorry. So yeah, it's out of the ground. So.
But the strawberry goes in a bush.
Yeah. Yes. And it also dies from year to year. It's also.
Oh, so that's the key here. Strawberry is a herbaceous perennial, which means that it dies in the winter and it grows new foliage every spring. Right? So the strawberry, where the bush dies every winter and grows again, would be considered growing in the ground. It's not a tree. Again, a tree would be defined by something that lasts through the winter. That's considered a tree. Now you've got to become a farmer or a botanist just to really be able to be familiar with the blessings. So that was easy, the banana and the strawberry. But let me ask you now a question. What about a raspberry? See, a raspberry, the raspberry does die. The bush does die every winter. However, it doesn't die down to its root. It's only the canes that die. It's only the bush part, but the roots do not die. So now, is the raspberry considered a tree because the roots remain from year to year, or is it considered a something that grows in the ground because the bush itself does die through the winter? This is where things get very, very complicated. Any ideas there? Anybody? It's on Facebook? Anybody on YouTube? Anybody got ideas on YouTube on what blessings we would make on a raspberry? Okay. The answer is, on a raspberry, most authorities hold that you can bless Borei Pradama, who creates the fruit of the ground. And the Alter Rebbe defines this in the Code of Jewish Law, is that the raspberry canes grow directly out of root rather than growing out of the branches. And since it's the root that grows in the ground, therefore it's considered growing out of the ground from the root. It's not even growing out of the bush, it's growing out of the ground. One final question. Blackberries. I'm no botanist, but from what I understand, the blackberries somehow do grow in a bush, which lasts from year to year, and therefore the blackberries would be Borei Priya Eitz. Okay? So this is where things get very technical, and if you want a full list of where you can find the blessings of various kinds of foods, you can find them at oukosher.org. That's oukosher.org/guide to blessings. Or you can just download a free app called Brachos, the Jewish Blessings app, on the App Store. That's Brachos, the Jewish Blessings app on the App Store, where you can find all of your handy blessings available for quick blessing. All right, so that's the blessings before food. We're going to get soon to the blessings after food. Any questions so far before we proceed? Right, so far so good. So let's talk about meat and milk. When it comes to Jews and food, one of the biggest most famous elements of our practices with food is the separation of meat and milk. It's fascinating. It's really fascinating how we separate the meat and the milk. How long are you supposed to wait after eating meat? You know, the Torah says that you shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk. It said it 3 times. You shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk. And the Talmud, the oral law, explains to us that why is this repeated 3 times? To tell us, number 1, you're not allowed to cook it together, even if you don't eat it. Number 2, you're not allowed to eat it, even if you don't cook it. And number 3, you're not allowed to benefit from it, even if you don't eat it. No eating, no cooking, no benefiting. You can't even serve a mixture of meat and milk to your dog, because that would mean that you're benefiting from the mixture of the meat and the milk. So, how long do you have to wait for it to be considered separated? The general rule is that after meat, you need to wait 6 hours. 6 hours after eating meat before you can eat milk. It's based upon the Talmudic ruling that you're not allowed to eat meat and milk in the same meal. And since you typically eat 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and those meals are typically 6 hours apart from each other, therefore the Code of Jewish Law rules that we have to stop. We have to wait 6 hours before eating our next meal of milk, after eating meat. We had a comedian here once, Elon Gold, who was saying that Jews are always watching the time. You know, when we're eating meat, we're looking and we're like, okay, I know that by 5:52, I'm going to be allowed to eat that, to have that cup of espresso. We're making plans for our next meal while we're munching on our current meal. It's quite an interesting concept, how we operate. We're always very mindful of what comes before and after. Which means if you had a pastrami sandwich at 3 o'clock in the morning, you cannot have your cappuccino in the morning until 9 o'clock. Till 9 a.m., 6 hours. What happens after eating milk? How long do you have to wait after eating milk? You still have to wait the 6 hours. The answer is no. Technically, all you have to do after eating milk is to clean out your hands from residue of the milk, and eat something parev, neutral, take a drink, both of which serve to clean out the mouth. That's it. So basically, clean yourself, rinse yourself, and you're ready to roll with meat. You don't really have to wait after eating milk. Right? However, when it comes to aged cheese, the blue cheeses, the Parmesan cheeses, the Swiss cheeses, those ones, it is preferable to wait the same amount of time as it is to wait after meat, which is 6 hours. And the reason is because meat, which is very, very heavy, needs to digest from your teeth and needs to digest from the lining of your esophagus and your stomach. And that's why you need to wait that time for the body to digest it. Milk is much easier for the body to digest. It goes much quicker. You can just rinse and clean, and you're ready to eat the next meat meal without worrying about mixing it. However, when you're eating the aged cheeses, they're like meats. They're so aged, they're so heavy. That's your question, Rob. The difference is that meat is much heavier and it's much more difficult for the body to digest. In fact, it gets stuck in between your teeth and on the lining of your esophagus. But when it comes to milk, it goes much easier, unless it's an aged cheese, in which case would take much, much longer to go down. One thing I have to tell you, though, is that according to the Zohar, which we celebrated yesterday on Lag BaOmer, it is customary to delay eating after milk 1 hour at least, after any dairy. And this is based upon what it says in the Zohar, that one should wait after dairy before consuming meat. And because there is a view that says that after meat, you're supposed to wait just 1 hour. Therefore, we go for the lenient view after dairy. So after meat, we wait 6 hours because it's heavy. After milk, we don't really need to wait. Clean and rinse is enough. But you should wait to respect the Zohar, the Kabbalah, the mystical side of Torah. We do wait 1 hour. There's actually a place in the Zohar which says that if a person conceives a child after having consumed meat and milk in the same meal, it's got some very negative energy for that child, like very, very bad energy for that child to be conceived out of. So there's a lot of mysticism involved over here, much more than meets the eye. And that's why we follow the directives of the Torah. After meat, you wait 6 hours. After milk, even though you can merely clean and rinse, nevertheless, you should wait 1 hour after eating milk. Okay? Any questions so far, other than the ones posted? Okay. I'm going to keep moving along here. Now, before we get into our final section, which is the great stuff. Yeah.
For me, that's a favorite one, even though generally it's thought of as a catch-all kind of thing, but just the meditation of everything comes into being by God's will.
It's actually not God's will, Andy. It's God's word.
God's word.
Shakol yabi devaro, that it doesn't say birtzono, through his will. It says bidvaro, through his speech. Everything was created through his speech, and I agree with you. It's a very beautiful blessing where you really have the opportunity to meditate upon the voice-activated interface of creation. How God creates through his speech. And those of you that have studied Tanya with me, if you've learned Tanya chapters 20, 21, where the Alter Rebbe and Tanya gets into the magnificent meaning of the metaphor of speech. How just in speech, where each word that we say is completely nullified vis-a-vis the speaker, so too the world which was created by God's word is also completely valueless, incomparable to God in the same metaphor. So if you missed that class, you can find the Tanya class. You can just call the office here call Ashley at the office to find a recording of that chapters of Tanya. Really beautiful stuff about the meaning of the metaphor, but on a very simple level. When you think about the fact that God creates the world through a speech, it gives you tremendous courage and strength knowing that I'm never alone. God is always with me. God is always creating me at every moment in time. And God is watching over me, right? And if not that God was creating me at this moment, I would not exist. Terry, what about drinking something with almond milk or coconut milk after meat? Even though these don't have any real dairy in them, they somehow have a kosher dairy hechsher. So, Terry, to answer your question, when we're talking about meat and milk right now, let's talk about the exclusions. We're not talking about almond milk or coconut milk. That is not milchik. It's not dairy. Coconut milk is fruit of a tree. Almond milk is fruit of a tree. We're not talking about that when we separate the meat and the milk. You can have coconut milk together with your burger. You can put it on your burger, as far as I'm concerned, as long as you make a sign or some sort of a marker that says this is not dairy, it's non-dairy creamer or non-dairy milk, right? So according to halacha, you got to avoid the false perception. When you're doing something which looks like it's wrong, you've got to put up a sign to show that you're not doing something wrong for spectators. So all you need to do, like if you go to a wedding or something where they're serving brisket and afterwards they're serving milk, coffee and milk, they'll have to have a sign on the table that says the milk here is non-dairy. Right, so that's answered your question. And the reason why those things have a hechsher is not because they have a kosher certification. It's not because they're dairy, but because they need to be kosher. How was the almond milk made? How was the coconut milk made? Which kind of factory? What kind of additives did they put in there? That's the reason why it has a certification. Julia, surely at the end of the day, whether you wait an hour or 4 or 6, it all ends up together in the same stomach. It ends up in the same stomach, Julia, but it goes in, what comes in, comes out, right? So it goes in the stomach and then it goes out of the stomach. The prohibition is for it to be in the stomach at the same time. And that's why we don't mix the meat. We wait for the milk for the meat to get digested before we put milk into that same stomach. Because if it was to stay there for too long, Julia, you know that you get very sick. I never understand why you can't have chicken and dairy together. You know it's chicken and not beef, and therefore in your heart you are doing the right thing. So when it comes to poultry, Julia, poultry is not legally or halachically considered meat. However, rabbinically, it was included in the prohibition because it became confusing. Thank God it did not decide to make fish also included in that prohibition. So till this very day, fish is considered neutral. You can have your bagels and lox and cream cheese. It's not a problem because you can have the cream cheese with your lox, not considered to be meat. But poultry was decided to be incorporated by the sages as meat, and that is a very sweeping prohibition. It is a very binding prohibition. The Torah gives mandates to the leaders of the generation to enforce the rules by divine control. So when the Torah says that you have to listen to the rabbis of your generation, that means that if the rabbis of your generation incorporated poultry into meat, that means that is the will of God. To the point, Julia, that when the angels asked of God, when is the new month beginning? God said to them, why are you asking me? Let you and I both go down to the earthly court and find out when they decided to sanctify the new month. God gives us that mandate. I know it might seem less important to you because it's not technically written in the 5 books of Moses. However, when you understand the dynamic of how Torah evolves, you realize that Torah does not only incorporate the received Torah in Mount Sinai, it also includes oral Torah, as well as the derived Torah and the decrees of Torah. I gave a whole course on that once in, it was called Judaism Decoded. And if you'd like to hear more about that, you can call the office here to receive the recordings of that course. It was a very profound discussion on how the Torah evolves and what is incorporated in the Torah. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay. All right. We're continuing now with the table as an altar, as a place that we can serve God. By the way, today when you're not able to say Kaddish with a minyan, I'd like to encourage you to elevate the souls of your loved ones. Not through Kaddish, but through Torah study. I'd like to encourage you to dedicate a day or a week or a month of Torah study in loving memory of your birthsite. So whilst you normally maybe dedicate a Kiddush in loving memory of someone whose birthsite is happening, this way you can dedicate Torah study. And you can do that on our website at jewishgardens.com/donate. That's jewishgardens.com/donate, where you can dedicate a day, a week, or a month of Torah study in the elevation of the soul of a loved one of yours who can't be elevated right now through Kaddish or through Kiddush, but certainly Torah is just as powerful, if not more powerful, in elevating their souls by dedicating this Torah study and all the Torah study that we do in a day, a month, or a week to their memories. You'll find that at jewishgardens.com/donate. Now, we mentioned last week on Friday that the Talmud compares our dining room to the temple, and the center of our dining room, which is the table, is compared to the altar. You know, that's why you're not supposed to sit on a table, because a table is compared to an altar. It's holy. And just like you're not supposed to lounge around on the altar, so too you're not allowed to lounge around on a table. And there's a few important elements of our dining room table that is holy and sanctified. Remember, we said this course is Judaism at home, altar for God. Let's try to put that in perspective. For starters, when you have guests, we learned that in the merit of inviting guests to our meals, we can secure personal atonement. That by having guests, you're already sanctifying and uplifting your table. That's already something very powerful to do. And a very important element to incorporate is to bring inviting guests to your home. Friday night, Shabbos day, any time, even in the weekday. Just invite guests. It's that Abraham was blessed with a son in the merit of inviting guests. There was a family here in Palm Beach Gardens when we first moved here. They were struggling with fertility. So we brought Rabbi Krinsky here, Chana's grandfather, Abel's grandfather, and this family hosted an event in their house, and he said to them, in the merit of your hospitality, you'll merit to have a child. They had more than one child very soon after. It was beautiful to see the blessing fulfilled. Another way that we can sanctify our tables, our eating tables, is a Torah study. When we learned last week that you're not supposed to daven in order to eat, you're supposed to eat and not to daven. We take the physical and we use it to enhance the spiritual. And therefore, when you use your Torah table your food table for Torah, even if it's a brief idea while eating, that is a beautiful way to sanctify the table. If every day, every meal, every Shabbos meal, you have something prepared, this is a very important part of your spirituality at home. It's just like the mother, the wife might be cooking the Shabbos meal. The husband should be spending time for Shabbos finding something palatable, something delicious to share with the people around the Shabbos table. Something you learned, something that you heard, something that you want to share. And that becomes a beautiful conversation to sanctify the Shabbos table or the weekday table. At our table, when we eat at home, we always make sure to speak about something of Torah. We ask the kids, what did you learn today? We make it into discussion. We have a story. We've got an insight. There's always something about the parsha. There's always Torah around our table, and that's how we sanctify the table. Remember also that the purpose of our souls descent into this world is in order to turn this physical world into a holy place, a holy home for God, a place where God is comfortable. Now, since our food is, the belly of the beast, it is the essence of this physical world. We use our tables, our eating tables, to be a place where we can invite God through Torah study, in addition to food being kosher, for us, then what we're doing is that we're elevating our tables. Just like we spoke last week about animal offerings in the temple, that the purpose of the animal offering wasn't just to kill the animal. It was in order to lift up all of the physical world in an intimate connection with God, as the word korban means, which means to come close. An offering for this physical world, all the elements of this physical world, the inanimate, the vegetable kingdom, the animal kingdom, and the human kingdom, to all form an intimate relationship with God. So too, when we eat kosher food at our table with guests and we invite Torah to the table, we're also making it all holy, eating for the right purpose, showing that the food is there to serve the purpose of Torah, of nurturing our relationship with God, and not the other way around. We eat in order to daven and not daven in order to eat, thus sanctifying our entire eating experience. And that's, by the way, the reason also that we wash our hands before we eat. You know, we mentioned this last week, how you take the cup and you pour it 3 times on the right and 3 times on the left. That is reminiscent of the way that Kohanim, the priests, washed their hands before they started the daily service in the temple. They used a kior, which is a wash basin. They had a cup, and that cup is, the cup reminds us of the kior, of the giant wash basin that they used out there in the temple to make us more mindful of the fact that what we're doing right now is actually a holy experience. We spoke about salt also last week, about how salt reminds us of the unbreakable covenant with God, how God never gives up on us. We spoke about that last week, about the significance of salt on the table, which also brings holiness to our table. But one thing I want to tell you is that you'll notice that we take the salt after hamotzi and we dip the bread in the salt. So we spoke about why we have salt. That was last week's lesson. But why do we dip the bread in the salt and not sprinkle salt on your bread? I'm curious to know, in your home, how did your parents do this? How do you do it at your home? Do you sprinkle the bread in the salt, or do you dip the bread? Sorry, do you sprinkle the salt on the bread, or do you dip your bread in salt? Folks, comments, please. How do you do it in your home? How did your parents, your Babi and Zaidi, how did they do it? Any comments? Sorry, who was that?
So we did have the other way around, the salt put on the bread rather than bread.
Oh, so you put the salt on the bread. Okay. So our custom, Andy.
Yeah, my father did, is what Hannah reminds me.
Okay, so let me explain to you why we specifically do it the other way around. We put the bread on the salt. And I see Adrian says the same thing. Adrian in South America, they put the bread on the salt and not the salt on the bread. The reason is like this. And we do it 3 times, by the way. The reason is that salt, which is bitter, represents divine strictness, divine judgment, gevura. And bread, which is the quintessential food, sustaining people, represents life and kindness, which is chesed. So bread is chesed, kindness. Salt is strictness, gevura. Which one do you want to be dominant? When God relates to you, do you want God to have his strictness overwhelm his kindness? Or do you want his kindness to overwhelm his strictness? The reason for dipping, and this is obviously a Kabbalistic reason, the reason for dipping the bread in the salt is to make dominant the bread, the kindness over the strictness, instead of the salt over the bread to make the strictness dominate over the kindness, because the way we initiate is the way that God reciprocates. Our various nuances cause the mirror image of God to react upon us, which is, by the way, that we're told even how you're supposed to tie your shoelaces in the morning. You're supposed to put your right shoe on before your left shoe, because you're supposed to give dominance to your kindness over your strictness. And I know it sounds absurd to say that God doesn't really care about which way you put your shoes on, but when you think about the fact that you are the focal point of creation, the focal point of all of existence, and how you initiate is how God reciprocates. When you give dominance to the right over the left, then God also gives dominance to the right over the left. And he looks down at you and he says, no, Julia, nice person, but she's got some problems, some faults. Will those faults be emphasized over the greater picture, or will the greater picture overwhelm the faults? That depends on how you put your shoes on in the morning. It all depends on whether you dip the bread in the salt or the salt in the bread. Nothing is by chance. Everything is on purpose. So, Julia says, Talmudically. No, sorry. Talmudically, if you're in solitary confinement and you're mixing chicken and dairy, what can the rabbis argue? I don't really understand your question. Like, what's the difference if you're in solitary confinement, or if you're on a desert island, or if you are in the middle of Times Square? Like, what's the difference? You mean regarding other people that might be confused? The rabbis decreed. Once it became a decree, it was elevated to the status of meat. Done. You can't start to differentiate and say, well, in this case, the chicken is not considered meat, but in that case, the chicken is considered meat. Once they made a ruling, it became law. It's kind of like a judge in 2020 who might rule about abortion, or who might rule about, I don't know, let's say a judge tomorrow decides that, whatever they decide, then that becomes the law, finished. It doesn't matter if it became the law in 2020, in 1920, or in 1776. It makes no difference. The law is not binding. Whether it's solitary confinement or in Times Square makes a difference. I understand your point about Marseille, about perception. It's no longer about perception. The law was enacted because of perception, but once it was enacted, it binds in all cases. Okay, so hopefully we understand now why we dip the bread into the salt. And we do that 3 times, because 3 times sort of like cements something into, makes it permanent, right? Maybe a little bit of Jewish OCD. One more point I want to share with you guys about health highlights from Maimonides. Maimonides tells us a number of tips for healthy eating. He, remember, was a very famous physician. Here's what he tells us. He says, number 1, do not talk with food in your mouth. We know that one. Number 2, if you eat slowly, says Maimonides, you will live long. It's actually from the Talmud Brachos. If you eat slowly, you'll live long. That's a very interesting one, right? If you eat slowly, chew your food, you'll live long. And I know that a lot of illnesses, most illnesses that afflict humans, are caused by harmful foods or by overeating even healthy foods. Right? That's also from Maimonides. So you got to be very careful with the foods that you eat, making sure that they're healthy foods and that they're eaten in moderation and that they're eaten slowly. Our aunt is a nutritionist. She tells us that if 1 is starving, hungry, and 10 is satisfied, she tells us you're supposed to come into a meal as a 3, and you're supposed to leave the meal as a 7. You're not supposed to eat till you're stuffed. Some people eat till they're 14, till they're overfull. That's very bad. You come into a meal as a 3, and you leave a meal as a 7. Maimonides says that you're not supposed to eat to the point of being full. You're supposed to stop when you're 3/4 to the point of satisfaction, right? See, Warren is telling me I'm in trouble. I should eat slowly, and you are right. Don't think that I'm preaching here to you. I'm talking to myself. Absolutely. Stephanie says, as a lefty, is kindness on my left. That is true. A lefty, his left is my right. Interesting. You just got like a mirror image. Okay. Yeah, you still have to dip your bread in salt. Right? Okay, some other factors here that come from table etiquette. You're not supposed to eat standing. You're not supposed to lick your fingers. And gulping your drink in one shot is a sign of greed. Also, this one relates to COVID, to pandemics. One should not drink out of a cup and then give it to another person. For some people are particular about this. It's gross for some people don't. Okay, now when it comes to respecting food, remember, food is not just something which sustains us. It's actually holy. It's a gift from God. So you got to be very respectful about food. And you got to give it a measure of dignity. So here's some of the practices that the Code of Jewish Law tells us about some guidelines relating to food. If we see food on the floor, you're not supposed to step on it. You've got to pick it up. We don't throw bread. Even if doing so won't ruin the bread, you're not supposed to throw bread. You wouldn't throw something is beneath us in this world. It means that it's higher than us in heaven. So the fact that food is able to sustain us in this world means that up in heaven, food is actually higher than us. So you got to be respectful. That's why you have to be respectful of animals too. right? You're not supposed to, in some Sephardic custom, when they cut the bread, they throw the bread to everybody. And I'm always horrified when I see that, because I know that in the Kabbalistic tradition, you're not supposed to throw bread. It's considered disrespectful to throw bread. I wonder if any of our listeners here do that. Interesting. Okay, a few more pointers on the Code of Jewish Laws guidelines to respecting food. Do not pass a cup full to the brim over bread, lest it spill over the bread. Don't use wine as a cleaning agent, because that's not respectful to the wine. And finally, Ben Ish Chai, who was the chief rabbi of Baghdad, he would speak about the flower bouquets. They were prepared on the night before a bris, and how the flowers were made to stand upright by being wedged into fruits. He ruled that it was forbidden because you were wasting food. You're making those fruits inedible with whatever they were doing to hold up the flowers. Okay. Elaine, no more food fights. That is correct. Brandon, is there a Jewish view on what constitutes a table? This sounds like it's a question, but Plato and other philosophers spend a lot of time kvetching about it. A table is where you eat. You're not supposed to eat on the run. Sort of a table in your bedroom, where you might have a midnight snack or something. That is still considered a table. A table is a table. A table is where you eat. Now, an interesting question being posted here about why is it okay to throw candy at the bride and groom? You'll notice that you don't just throw candy. We always wrap it. It's always wrapped up in a respectable way. That way it's not getting ruined when you throw it. And remember, you're not throwing bread. You're supposed to wrap it before you throw it, because it's considered disrespectful to throw out the bread in its showing form, right? Interesting. Why can't you leave wine bottles open? Because they go bad. I think they go bad. There is a concept of leaving liquids in general open overnight for a concern of them getting poisoned by some insects or snakes or animals. That's the reason why you're not supposed to leave liquids out overnight. And it really makes sense. I mean, how do you know if you're leaving a liquid open? How do you know what got in there? It's certainly more sanitary to leave it sealed if you're able to. See, right? It's just not sanitary to leave the food open like that. Right? Any other questions before we go to our final section? Final section is the grace after meal, with which we're going to wrap it up today. Any other questions?
One comment. In the olden days, once upon a time, they would even make an altar out of stones. And so a table can be similarly almost anything. It can be anything. It can be a picnic table. It can be a board placed on two file cabinets.
And I think it could be a mat. It could be a picnic mat as well. Right? I think that could also technically be a table. I think the essence here is, Andy, that it depends on the mindset. You see, when you are cognizant of the fact that eating is a holy experience, you get into the frame of mind that my eating is another way for me to be able to serve and connect to my Creator. So it doesn't really matter about the medium. As long as you know that I'm connecting to God through this manner of eating, with the blessings before, and the kosherness of the food, and the guests around the table, and the salt on the table, and the dipping of the salt, and the something else, the Torah words around the table. That's what happened. That's the causes that the table becomes a holy experience. So it's not so much about how high is the table, how many legs does the table have, right? We're not getting technical about that, even though we love to get technical. Nevertheless, it's about the appreciation of the fact that you are able to connect with God even through your food, which is a major chiddush, a major novelty. In other religions, see food as a weakness. Fasting is extolled. Food is considered as a human failing, right? As Jews, we barely fast. I mean, 5 days a year, that's it, We even say, you can redeem the fast in some cases. It's not a big deal. But we realize that you can serve God through eating. Remember, the purpose is not to be spiritual. The purpose is to be holy. I've said this many times. Spiritual is the absence or avoidance of physical. But holy is doing what God wants. And if God wants you to eat the brisket, but just 1 hour after you had the cappuccino, then the brisket becomes holy. That became a holy brisket. Because you're not doing what's spiritual, you're just doing what's holy, you're doing what God wanted, right? what God wants. If you're enjoying today's video, click on the blue thumbs up below the video. Thank you, Rob. Much appreciated. Again, we're not on Facebook today because we decided to be on Zoom. But if you would be able to share today's video, that would be tremendous. I do want to share with you a quick thing over here, which we found out yesterday. We have some fascinating statistics on our YouTube, just to tell you. On our YouTube channel, we have I don't know where it is, but we've had like amazing statistics on our YouTube channel. Tremendous feedback on here. In the past 28 days, there have been 32,000 hours of views on our YouTube channel. 32,000 hours of people learning Torah in the past 28 days. No, sorry, 32,000 minutes. I'm sorry. 32,000 minutes. My apologies. What else? 2,800 individual people viewed our website on YouTube. Lots of stuff going on. So if you could please do what Rob says, as Rob encourages, like the video, to spread the video, to share the video. That would be very much appreciated. Somebody emailed me yesterday about a very difficult challenge that they were going through spiritually. And I sent them the video that we taught in Tanya yesterday, which is about the challenges that you face during times of spiritual growth. And this person sent me an email this morning saying that it really made a profound impact upon them, which is beautiful to hear. And we can really spread the light and the love during these times. So let's try to do that. And again, if you can't say Kaddish for your loved ones and you'd like to dedicate something in memory of your loved ones, you can dedicate the daily Torah study, the weekly Torah study, the monthly Torah study in memory and elevation of the soul of your loved one. You can do that at jewishgardens.com/donate. That's jewishgardens.com/donate. I'd like to wrap up here today with the grace after meals. We spoke about the blessings before. Let's talk now about the grace after meals. It's a biblical commandment to bless God after a meal. Ve'achalta savata uvirachta, and you shall eat, and you shall be satisfied, and you shall bench, and you shall bless God. So eating, satisfied, and then blessing means that you're supposed to bless God after you eat. That's a biblical commandment to bless God after you eat. Why? And that, by the way, comes from Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 8, verse 10. Why is it that we're commanded to bless God after eating, but not before? Why are we not commanded to bless God before eating? Rationally, it actually makes sense. The reason is because hold on. The reason is because before we eat, we're hungry. When we're hungry, it's very easy to be cognizant of the presence of God. It's when you're full, that's when we grow fat and apathetic. That's when we lose touch with our Creator. You know, when your bills are all paid, it's very difficult for you to understand the pain of someone who cannot pay their bills. There's that great story I mentioned it a while ago about a rabbi who was collecting for charity, and during a snowy, terrible blizzard, he goes to the home of a philanthropist, a prospect, to donate. He asks him, he greets him at the door. He says, "Rabbi, come in, it's freezing outside." He says, "No, I want to talk to you over here outside. Step outside with me into the blizzard." And he says, "Okay, Rabbi, but what do we need to talk about?" And he tells him about the plight of those that have no shelter. So the rabbi says, "Okay, Rabbi, I'll answer you inside. I'm going to freeze. We'll catch our deaths over here." He says, "No, give me an answer over here." And eventually, when he tells them, he gives them the pledge, they go inside, and he says, "Rabbi, why do we need to talk outside?" He says, "Because as long as you are people I was talking about. But when you'd be in the comforts of your living room by the fire and the leather couches, you wouldn't be able to understand the pain of those that don't have a roof over their heads." So before we eat, we're very hungry, we're vulnerable, and we turn to God. You know, recessions fill up the synagogues. But it's when the economy is booming, that's when the synagogues kind of dwindle, because people feel that they don't need God because I'm such a genius, I'm so smart. That's why we need a biblical command. When do we need a bench? What is this? 3 kinds of blessings after the meal. 3 kinds of blessings after the meal. And for those of you that are with me on Zoom, I'd like to show you those on the screen. Otherwise, you can go to the... No, I don't have them on the screen. Whatever. We have got a link for it. You can find the Grace After Meals in Hebrew and in English, friends, on our website. You go to jewishgardens.com/136 676. There's 136676. I'm gonna post it to. I almost X'd out YouTube. I'm gonna post it to YouTube right now. It's at this link. Jewish Gardens. /136-676. That's where you're going to find your benching in Hebrew and in English, right? Over there's 3 kinds of benching that we make. Depends what you ate. If you ate one of the 5 grains, what are the 5 grains? Wheat, barley, spelt, oats, and rye. Those are the 5 grains, by the way, regarding Pesach as well. Matzah has got to be made out of wheat, barley, spelt, oats, and rye. Rice matzah or potato matzah doesn't make the cut. It's not considered bread. It's got to be wheat, barley, spelt, oats, or rye to be considered bread. And after eating those 5 grains, if you ate bread made from those 5 grains, then you do the full benching, which is the grace after meal that's at that link that I gave you, jewishgardens.com/136-676. Now, how much did you have to eat in order to be considered obligated to the benching? Our sages tell us that even after eating a kazayas, which is an olive size of bread, that's approximately 1 ounce of bread. If you just ate 1 ounce, you got a bench already. Again, you could say that it depends on how full you feel, but the sages made a blanket rule that if it's just an ounce of bread, then it is considered worthy of the benching. That became the ruling. It's no longer fluctuating. Okay. Here's how benching works. Before you start benching, you have to mention Jerusalem. We have to mention Jerusalem at some point during the meal. Therefore, the sages instituted to recite a psalm, which again you'll find on that link, jewishgardens.com/136-676. If it's Shabbos and Yontiv, you'll say Psalms 126. Psalms 126, which is Shir Ha'ma'alos V'shuv Adoshem, the song of ascents, when God will return to Zion. It talks about the joy and the gladness that we'll experience when Mashiach will come. So that's all nice and well. It's very joyous. But in the weekdays, not on Shabbos and Yontiv, we actually say Psalm 137 on the rivers of Babylon. There we sat, there we cried. If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, I'll forget my right hand. Either way, we're remembering Jerusalem. We're talking about Jerusalem in the meal before the benching. We're sanctifying our tables, right? Then what we do is we mentioned this last week. We wash our fingertips. Just the fingertips. We're supposed to wash the fingertips with water. The basic objective is to clean our hands. There's a health concern here we spoke about in the last class. And before we bench, there's the element of communal prayer. Just like you're supposed to daven with a minyan, there is a concept of a mezuman. A mezuman is not 10 men, but 3 men around the table. If you do have 3 men over bar mitzvah around the table, then you do say the grace, and then you do have the Rabbi Sai Mirvelen benching, the communal benching, which is an elevated form of holiness. If you're on your own, it's holy. If you're in a group, it's even more holy. If you're in a minyan, it's even more holy. So 3 men is considered a group, a crowd, and therefore you do the preamble to the benching, the Rabbi Sayin, the Bareich, friends, let us bench together. And in general, the benching incorporates 3 general themes that have to be incorporated in the blessings. There's 4 blessings in the benching. We'll learn about them right now. The first concept in benching is thanking God for providing us with food so that we can be satisfied. That is the first blessing. The second theme is thanking God for giving us the land of Israel. And the third theme is mentioning Jerusalem, God's chosen city. Now, in the benching, the first blessing was written by Moses. When the manna fell and sustained the Jews for 40 years in the desert. They thanked God for that. That was a blessing written by Moses. That blessing written by Moses. The second blessing was written by Joshua, soon after leading the Jews into the land of Israel. It thanks God for the mitzvahs and for the land of Israel. The third blessing was composed by King David. Rachim was composed by King David and his son, King Solomon. Their prayer was to continue to protect the Jewish holy city and the temple, right? Because they had built the holy city and the temple, Solomon at least. After the destruction of the temple, the language of the blessing was slightly modified to reflect a plea that we be returned to the holy city and returned to the temple in its full glory. And now that would theoretically end the full benching after the third blessing. We thank God for being the builder of Jerusalem in his mercy. All right, bring us back soon. However, that's not where we end. We had one more blessing. 2,000 years ago, they added, after the second temple was destroyed, there was the rise of the revolution of Beitar with Rabbi Akiva and Bar Kokhba. They rebelled against the Romans. And what happened was, it was a blessing of thanks. And a long story, basically the Romans eventually, the Jews managed to have an independent state 2.5 years. Under the rule of Bar Kokhba, they actually minted their own coins in Beitar. And when the Romans eventually vanquished that uprising, they were so brutal that they refused to allow the Jews to bury their dead for 14 years. 14 years later, when they were able to bury their dead, the dead was still warm as if they had just died. And in gratitude to God for this extraordinary miracle, this kindness to be able to give dignity and honor to our dead, they instituted the fourth and final blessing of the benching, which is one that is a blessing of thanks. It begs God to provide for us, to protect us, to restore us to the Holy Land, and to usher in the era of the Mashiach. It is interesting that before that fourth blessing, we do add Amen after our own blessing. We don't normally say Amen after our own blessing. The reason we add Amen is in order to differentiate between the first three blessings, which are of biblical origin, and the fourth blessing, which is of rabbinic origin. Now, even though the benching is admittedly a little bit long, it's not all or nothing. Take it easy, take it slowly. Start with the first paragraph. Try to understand the first paragraph. Hopefully in our meditation and prayer course, we'll soon get, as soon as we finish the Shema, we'll get to the blessing of, the first blessing of the benching, which is also a very popular prayer, to be able to properly understand how to read that. We'll get to that shortly. Now, that is the blessing for bread, the after blessing for bread. What about other kinds of food? So if you're eating foods made out of the 5 grains that were not bread, like cookies or cakes, or if you were eating of the 5 fruits of Israel, the 7 fruits of Israel, which are grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, or dates. The 7 fruits of Israel: grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, dates, and wheat and barley. Those are the 7 fruits of Israel. Wheat and barley, obviously part of the 5 grains. So if you have any of the 5 grains, wheat, barley, spelt, oats, and rye, or the other 5 fruits of Israel, olives, pomegranates, dates, figs, and grapes, any of those 10 foods, there's another blessing which you make, which is the shortened grace after meals. It mentions, it praises the land of Israel, which obviously is the land of the 7 fruits, the national fruits of Israel. And you'll find that in the prayer books right after the regular grace after meals. I am hopeful that this link that I sent you also has the shortened benching, I hope. Let's see. Is it only the grace after meals for meat, for breads, or is it also the shortened benching? Let's take a quick look. I'm not sure, my screen isn't loading properly right now, so it's very slow. I can't tell. I'm not sure. I can't tell. It's being very slow. In any event, let's see. Yeah, it does look like, yeah, it does. If you go to the link that I sent you on page 10 of that link, you will find it's on my screen right now. On page 10 of my link, it's right after the long blessing of bread, the great after meals for bread. Right after that in the prayer book, it is on page 96 of the Blue Chabad prayer book, is the blessing after certain foods, which is the 5 grains and the 5 special fruits of Israel. And that's listed over there with the various additions for Shabbos and Yontif. But if it's anything else, any other kinds of food, which is not made out of the 5 grains, if it's just the fruit of a tree or the fruit of the ground, or anything else like which doesn't grow in the fruit of the tree or the ground, then you just make a very short after blessing on page 97 of our book on my screen right now, on page 10 of the handout. You say, blessed are you, Lord God, King of the universe, creator of numerous living beings and their needs, for all the things you have created with which to sustain the soul of every living being. Blessed is he who is the life of the world. That's it. That is the after blessing, which you say after all other foods. Nice and easy, no big deal. I encourage you to print this out, have it in your kitchen, have it in your dining room, put it on your phone. So that way, make a shortcut on your home screen. That way, whenever you need to bench, doesn't matter where you are, you know how to bench. You could do it in Hebrew, you could do it in English. Either way, it's all good, and you'll be able to fulfill the biblical commandments, right? One final point with which I want to conclude is that when we bench, during the benching, you're supposed to remove knives from the table. Why do you remove knives from the table? The reason is because there were no knives allowed upon the altar. Knives made of metal were weapons of death, and the altar is a place of life, a place of connection with God, of connecting with our purpose in this world. Knives end the people's lives, and that's why no knives were allowed upon the altar. Therefore, upon our tables, which are also altars, you're not allowed to have knives, but that wouldn't work while we're eating because we need knives to eat. At least during the time of benching, when you don't technically need the knives, you should remove the knives from the table, or at least cover them from the table. So that way, we are once again cognizant of the fact that our tables are a holy place, a holy meeting point where we're not only meeting with each other or with our digestive system, but also meeting with our Maker on a deep and meaningful level. By eating in a Jewish manner as best we can, we will indeed bring atonement and healing to ourselves and to the entire world. So thank you, friends, for joining me here this morning for the study of Jews and food. Let me look at the final comments here on YouTube. Is rice considered a grain, Elaine? The answer is no. Rice is not considered a grain with regards to the blessing of to making it into bread. However, there is a debate in Jewish law about whether rice needs to have the after blessing. So that is complicated. And the simple way to deal with it, again, I told you the laws of blessings are very complex. The simple way to deal with it is that when you eat rice, you eat some cookies beforehand. And once you made a blessing on the cookie beforehand, you don't have to make a blessing of mezonot on the rice, because rice is a bit of a gray area. So the general consensus is just eat a cookie or a piece of cake or something which is a mezonot blessing before, and that would, as well as a shahakol blessing, and that would cover it. Blessing over liquor, Warren, is, I knew somebody had to ask this question. Liquor is shahakol ni'avet varo, that God created everything through his speech. That is something which doesn't grow in the tree, doesn't grow in the ground. By the way, don't forget, things get very complex when you take liquor, like let's say orange juice. Orange juice, where does orange juice come from? It comes from a tree. So did you make a blessing over a tree over orange juice? The answer is no, because right now it's being squeezed and now it doesn't look like it came from the tree. It's in a different form. So in the orange, if you drank juice from the orange, you'd make a blessing borei pri ha'etz. But if you drank the juice out of a cup, you would not say the blessing borei pri ha'etz. You'd make the blessing of sha'kol and hiyabid varo, of everything being created through God's speech, because it's changed its form. This is where things get very complex. And you can just imagine what it's like when you start cooking and baking and all the interesting ways of baking. You know, if you walk into a store like Williams Sonoma and you see the interesting, or sur la table, the interesting ways that the French and the Italians have modified and evolved cooking techniques, you realize that there's so many different ways that you can make foods that it really becomes a very, very technical and interesting specialty of Judaism to know which kind of blessings you're supposed to make for which kinds of food. And it's a fascinating area of Jewish law. But at least in our course today, we wanted to just at least do a crash course, a DIY, for bringing holiness to our food experience at our homes. Friends, I do need to sign off. So I'm going to say thank you very, very much. Is there a comment coming in over here somewhere on Zoom? I don't know. Thank you, Rabbi. Great, Graciela. Gotcha. And thank you, everybody, for joining me here today. Tomorrow morning, we'll resume to our regular Torah study. It's either going to be Talmud or it's going to be Gates of Trust. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to do the expedited Gates of Trust or back to Talmud. Either way, we'll be doing that. Hopefully, we'll be doing some meditation and prayer as well. And we'll continue on Friday morning with the class on Judaism at home. And we're going to be talking about prayer. We're moving on into the next section of Judaism at home, which is how to pray. It's going to be a crash course in prayer. That's on Friday morning. Today's the class by Corey at 11:30 on Zoom, jewishgardens.com/Zoom. She gives Monday, Wednesday, and Friday a class on Tehillim on Psalms at 11:30. And tonight, don't forget, Hannah is also giving a class at 8 o'clock on Ethics of the Fathers. That class is on Zoom, jewishgardens.com/Zoom. It's on chapter 4 of Ethics of the Fathers about love and relationships. That's our class tonight. Hannah is on Zoom. Anything else I wanted to mention to you was that, again, if you wanted to make a dedication to tzedakah, to elevate the souls of your loved ones, please consider making a dedication to daily, weekly, or monthly Torah study here at jewishgardens.com/donate. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us here today. Shalom. Have a wonderful day, and it's always a pleasure to study with you. Thank you.